Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of That's Inclusive. I'm going to be your host today, Pat Vincent-Piet, and I have a really great guest that I've been trying to get on for a while now. Liz Canada is the Advocacy Director for Planned Parenthood of Northern New England and Planned Parenthood New Hampshire Action Fund. Quite a mouthful.
I
But
know, truly.
they are also the creator and host of my new favorite obsession, New Hampshire Has Issues. So, Liz, when I came across your podcast, and I can't remember now how I heard about it, but the name got me. I heard the name New Hampshire Has Issues and thought, that's the podcast for me. But I moved here in like 2000, and at the time, there were signs everywhere. New Hampshire, the best place to start a small business. New
Yeah,
Hampshire, the best place to raise a family. New
totally.
Hampshire, the best. I was assured, Liz, that there were no issues.
No issues in New
And
Hampshire, right?
and now you're telling me that there were issues? How
Yeah.
did you come up with that name?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to create a podcast that talked about what's happening in New Hampshire in a way that any person who might care about any of these issues might want to listen to. So if I called the podcast something like New Hampshire Policy, a lot of people wouldn't listen to that because that
Mhm.
sounds extremely boring. So I wanted a title that really spoke to the tone of the show. You've been a guest on my show. The tone is very sort of lighthearted. A recent guest called it jovial. So we talk about, I cover one issue per episode with an expert in that field, whether it's, their background, their lived experience, their profession. I talk with an expert and we talk about a serious issue in kind of a not so serious way because I want it to be something that anyone can jump into and understand because the issues that New Hampshire faces, you just listed a lot of things that people say about New Hampshire. Best place to start a business, best place to raise a family, and yet extremely expensive to live here. Uh,
Yep.
Property taxes are very, very high. It is uh, very hard to find housing in New Hampshire. So there are lots of issues that
Mhm.
you and I talked about that on our episode.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but we have a lot of things that could make New Hampshire a lot better. And the issues that New Hampshire faces, they're not here by accident. They're here by intentional decisions by people who have power in our state. And so I like to cover one issue per episode so that if somebody were sitting in my backyard with me and we were sitting around the fire pit and they said, Liz, why is housing so expensive? I'd be like, well, I have an episode for you. And it would feel a lot like sitting around a fire pit and chatting about it.
E- oh, Exactly. I mean, I would say that you really, if you were purposes to make things more accessible to people, these complex issues, you really do it because I listened. I listened to your episode on the state budget last
Mm-hmm.
year, and I had been gone to a presentation by New Hampshire Physical Policy
So smart
Institute.
people.
It was so smart. It
Yeah.
was a great presentation, but I walked away feeling overwhelmed and confused. And then I listened to your episode just maybe a week or so later,
hmm
and I left that episode thinking, now I have a handle on what's going on. Because
That's so great to hear.
the way you talked, the way you laid out, you asked really great questions that made me feel a little less unintelligent. But I was like, oh good, I'm not the only one that doesn't get
Yeah.
how this works. I'm not the only one who sat through that and left going, wow, I I'm so confused.
New
So
Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, that is a bunch of geniuses over there. They are
they are
so smart. They know Phil Sletton. I asked him on my, so we had a two-parter episode. We had an episode about the
right.
state budget. The first one was about revenue, money coming into the state. And the
Mhm.
second episode was about the expenses, money that is spent by the state. And I asked him in my episode because I've been to his presentations before. He has all of these incredible charts and pie graphs and just so much information. And I asked him, Phil, are you a robot? How do you know so much about this? You know so
Yes,
much.
she's so smart.
And what I try to do as the host of the podcast, New Hampshire Has Issues, is I try to think about what would my listener be wondering too. So as he's explaining it, I'm sort of jumping in and saying, wait, can you explain that to me? What do you mean that the interest and dividends tax was for these folks who have just hundreds of thousands of dollars in generated just income just sitting there? What, like, it boggled my mind. So I try to emulate a listener who is intrigued and interested, but might not know the ins and outs because our experts know so much. And I try to take like a tiny little step uh, backward of like, let's get down to like the
Yeah.
basics. What is going on here in New Hampshire?
Right, and I felt like when I listened to your podcast, after I had listened to the presentation, you were asking all the questions that I had.
Yeah,
Right, you
great.
were making it make sense in a way that it would not have made sense. So, but like we were just saying, you've had so many guests talking
Yeah.
about so many interesting and important things in the state. But do you have any that really stick out in your mind as favorite episodes? Or a
Well,
time when you learned something like
mm,
really unexpected or shocking?
mm-hmm. Well, much like a parent, I love all my children equally. Every episode is as wonderful as the other.
Yes.
I would say that I reference episodes, previous episodes more than others. There are some episodes that I look back to and I mention in episodes. So one being I talk about the Medicaid episode all the time. I constantly refer back to the episode about Medicaid with Christine Stoddard because
Mm.
so much goes back to what is health insurance? What is Medicaid? What does it mean to make sure that folks can get health care and be able to afford it and be able to get the care that they need in the time that they need it? So I feel like that's one that I reference quite a few times in other episodes. Another one is about affordable housing. One of my first episodes that I did was with Nick Taylor, who is, I believe his title is the executive director of Housing Action New Hampshire. And I mean, I feel like if you look at any poll from New Hampshire about what is on people's minds, it is the cost of housing and being able to afford a home, to be able to move, to be able to build an accessory dwelling unit, to have an accessory dwelling unit for, their parent who is aging. So I feel like that is an episode that sort of blossomed into future episodes about homelessness and housing, our episode about being able to have housing for folks who have disabilities and are, needing specific types of housing and what's available or not. Veterans who are in search, searching for housing. So I feel like those episodes stand out as ones that if someone is like, what episode should I start with? I point them in those directions. The other one being about elections. Our election
Mm.
law has
Oh yeah.
changed so much in the last
So
year or two.
dramatic.
And so uh, the episode that I have about voting with Mackenzie Taylor, we talk about how the law has changed pretty dramatically. New Hampshire is one of the hardest states to vote in, actually, because of what is needed to be able to register to vote, because of how, I'll just say, restrictive it is to register to vote. Lots of other states, you can register online, you can register at the DMV. In New Hampshire, you have to show up in person, and that's a huge deal. And you got to go to your town clerk's office or your city clerk's office, or you have to go on, election day. And then they've changed the law where you used to be able to sign a legal affidavit attesting to who you are, that, is a legal document. And they got rid of that last year. And so we've seen, she's talked about this on the episode, we've seen people turned away at the polls because they tried to register to vote. They didn't have all the documents that they needed. There is no fail-safe the day of election, and so folks have been turned away. So there are these issues, as we say, but they sort of spider out. And so there are lots of other topics to cover that still fit into elections, like yes, voting, but also town elections. I just had an episode with Sarah Pershino, who is the town moderator in Hopkinton. And like, what is town meeting? What does it mean to be a moderator? So uh, I do love every episode and every guest equally, but there are some that sort of stick out uh, when folks ask, like, what episode should I start with? I'm like, well, it depends on what topic you like the most, what intrigues you, and um, my guests, every single one is incredible. I've been really, really fortunate to have just phenomenal guests like yourself, Pat. Phenomenal guest.
Oh, well, so I wasn't searching for a compliment, but thank you very much.
Well, I'm full of them anyway because you were a great guest, and on our episode we talked about um, housing. We talked about curb cuts. We talked about just what is needed in New Hampshire when it comes to finding a home that is near the health care that you are trying to receive, that is near the community that you want to participate in. And
Right.
so when we think about affordable housing, there could be spots that we are not thinking about because maybe that's not our personal experience, but that's why I think these episodes are so important, to shine a light on an aspect of an issue we care about that maybe we haven't considered before.
Right. And then so there's a saying that all issues are disability issues, right?
Yeah,
So if
absolutely.
something is affecting you, odds are it's having a greater impact on your disabled neighbor, family member. But sometimes helping people to understand what that actually means, because people don't think of people with disabilities when they think about a lot of issues that impact them. What in all the issues that you've covered, and there's been so many, like we've talked about the budget, voting, Medicaid, healthcare, school funding.
Oh, yeah.
What have you learned about the impact of all these issues on the disability community?
I think you've said it. It's like the intersectionality is there on every single issue. There is not a single topic that I have covered that does not impact the disability community. There just isn't, because people with disabilities are part of our communities. They are affected by all of these things too. So, in the school funding episode that I had with Zach Sheehan, we talk about, what is fair funding. New Hampshire does not have fair school funding. It is one of
No.
the least fair funded schools. But what we haven't talked about, and what I am getting for a future guest, is about special education funding.
Hmm.
That is a whole area of school funding that plays out in school boards around the state, in deliberative sessions, in topics around their school budget, because they talk about what does it mean to be able to cover the cost of special education? Because the federal government is not doing enough to cover the cost of special education. Our state government does not do enough by far to cover the cost of school funding in general. And so that falls on the responsibility of local communities. And so if we're not talking about it, if we are not understanding the nuances of it and understanding the impact that it has on the students, the children, the families, the community, then we're missing a whole segment of the population because we need to cover the cost of education for every student. And that is such a huge debate in our state. And so special education funding has a significant impact on the community members who, of course, care about their students, want the best education possible. And also, it sometimes can feel like it's pitting taxpayers against folks with disabilities. And it shouldn't be that way. It should never be that way. But because we don't fund our schools fairly, it can feel that way. So there's a lot of responsibility that we have to look to at the state and at the federal government in terms of being able to make sure that we do our students justice, like that we're making sure that we're covering covering the cost for everybody. So every issue impacts folks with disabilities. We what I have seen in my work on the Budget Recommendations Committee, especially here in Exeter, has given me such insights as well into the specific departments in a town.
Mm.
And I've tried to sort of uncover that a little bit in the podcast as well. But if I've learned anything, Pat, it's that I have a lot to learn. I don't know what I don't know. And so I'm always trying to learn more and be better. And so that is something that I try to bring out in my podcast as well as I talk to guests of like, how can I learn this issue better? And what are the impacts that are happening on folks where maybe I haven't thought about it, but others certainly have. Others have that expertise, and we can learn significantly from them and be better Granite Staters in that process.
And it's awesome that you bring us along with you because uh, I've learned so much from listening to the podcast, and especially the episode on special education. At at the council, we try to use the term educational supports and services,
Hmm.
but even though officially, yes, special education
Right.
is the term,
Yep.
but we because the point is kids who need these supports and services aren't getting anything special. Right?
Ah,
They're
such a
not
good point.
getting anything. They're they're getting they're getting the education they need so that they are equal to their peers.
Right.
Right? They're getting an equitable education. It's not something it's not something special. And as I listened to that episode, I was I was again struck by how we're pitting, like you said, taxpayers against young people who need and deserve these supports and services, and we're making, in some cases, we're making the families into pariahs
Mm.
in their own community, and that's so unfair to everyone. But
What I really appreciated, oh, can I say one more thing,
no,
Pat?
go
What I
ahead,
what I
please.
appreciated about Zach's episode on school funding is he said communities want to support their schools. By
Mm,
and large, they want to make sure that their schools are the best they could possibly be. The community members they support their schools over and over again. They want
mm,
their public schools to be strong. And
right.
so this idea that like the reality is the majority of Granite Staters want strong public schools in their communities. They support their public schools. And so what I always try to go back to, or what I try to highlight in each episode, is that the state has a responsibility here, right? Like in this
Mm,
issue, the state does have a responsibility. And so I try to uncover like what is the state doing or not doing, and that is important. I try to make that really clear to the listener. Again, that
mhm,
this isn't magic. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't just, oh, bad luck that we got to a place where it's like this. These are intentional choices that are made. And so we can make different choices. We always have the opportunity to make different choices, whether as citizens, residents, Granite staters, or lawmakers. We can make that change.
mm.
If we know better, we can do better.
Yeah, yeah. And you were enjoying that we do know better, and I really appreciate that. Be so you mentioned something that I really hadn't heard of before, something called a budget recommendation
Mm.
committee.
Hmm.
What is that? Can you tell me more?
I would love to tell you more because I am such a hype person for a budget recommendations committee. So the first thing, just for the listener, do not panic when you hear budget because I know that some folks get spooked by spreadsheets. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
really about the spreadsheets. Budget Recommendation Committee, not every town has them. They have different styles of how they deal with their budgets. But in Exeter, which is where I live, we have a Budget Recommendations Committee. There's a group of people who take a look at the proposed budget by the town, and we go line item by line item to say, how are we spending our money as taxpayers in Exeter? What are we prioritizing? What do we need to put efforts toward? What can we maybe hold off on right now? What's maybe not an immediate need that we have to just be diligent about, like how much are we putting on putting on the warrant for this coming year? And it functions pretty close to what happens in the State House by the Finance Committee. So there is a Finance Committee in the House and the Senate. It's kind of similar, but it's just in your own local town. So in our town, the department heads create what they want their budget to be for the coming year. They put together like what their priorities are, what they need to be able to cover and fund. And then they meet with the town manager. The town manager sits down with them. We also have a finance director. They all sit down together and say, okay, let's go through this together. Take a look at what you're asking for. What do we think we should bring forward to the select board and the budget recommendations committee? From there, we jump in as the budget recommendations committee and we make recommendations, right? Like what I do in the budget recommendations committee, it's not the final say. I serve on three subcommittees. So I look at the budget in really, really intense detail for my subcommittees are Parks and Recreation, Library, and the Human Services Department. So folks may know that as the welfare office in a town. And so in our subcommittee, we meet with the department head and we hear from them and we ask questions. Some of the questions that we've asked, like for the Parks and Rec department, is like, okay, so you need this much money to cover the programming for seniors. Are there grants available that you'll be applying for? Or is this going to be specifically from the town? And so we learn more about like how did they arrive at this number that they are asking for? What have they already sought out in terms of external funding? What can they cover when it comes to fees, right? Like our boys go to the summer rec camp. So like the fees for that will go towards
Mm,
some programming. So the Budget Recommendations Committee is really like representing the town, the community members in the town to engage in a really detailed conversation on each part of the budget so that when our process is completed and we make changes, we sometimes lower what might be a line item. Sometimes we may say this actually needs more than even the department head has asked for. We really need to give them a
huh.
little bit more. And then our recommendations go to the select board. And the select board then says they have the same process. They talk it out. They debate it. But the final decision makers on our town budget, our legislators, are our voters. The end of the day, at the end of this process, it goes on the warrant, and the community members, the voters, decide, is this going to be the budget that we accept? So I'm one step in the process, just like the finance committee is one step of the state budget. They are one part of that conversation.
So if voters wanted to dig into and find out how you arrived at this recommendation,
Yeah.
how do they do that?
All of our meetings are public meetings, so
Okay.
everything is available to the general public. Our subcommittee meetings are typically not video recorded, but we have minutes from every subcommittee meeting. We have our budget recommendations committee meetings, full meetings, are all available online. Shout out to Exeter TV, making sure that all of our stuff is super accessible to folks who are watching from home. So folks can literally sit there and watch every single one of our debates, every single, and debate can sound negative, but it's really like
Right.
conversations, asking questions. One of the things that has come up time and time again, I've been serving on the committee I think since 2019. So many is about being able to hire people. It is hard to find people to work in local
Yes.
government. And so we talk about like, what are the salaries? What are the salaries of surrounding towns? If people are leaving our town to go work somewhere else, why are they leaving? Are they getting better salaries? Are they closer to their homes? So those conversations all happen in the Budget Recommendations Committee. So it is such a clear insight into how every single dollar and cent is spent by our town to make sure that things are moving and shaking in Exeter. So I am a super strong proponent. If you're looking to understand where are my tax dollars going, you should join your budget committee of your town or your school district because you will see clear as day exactly where your money is going.
Yeah, it's so that sounds really interesting, but it also sounds honestly a little labor intensive.
A little bit, a little bit, a little bit.
A little bit. But you would share a story with me a while ago
Mhm.
about how you experienced on the budget recommendation committee enlightened you as to the disabled resident in Exeter. Right? You learned you learned a little bit about how people with disabilities in your town access your town. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Absolutely. I feel like Exeter has done a lot when it comes to learning. I feel like our department heads are super receptive to trying to do better. Some of the things that have come up in Budget Recommendation Committee is about making sure that we have an accessible van for folks to use. It was pitched to us in the Parks and Rec subcommittee about seniors. But
Mm.
also, what came out in the full committee was how it also supports folks who have wheelchairs in general. Like, you don't have to be a senior to be using a wheelchair, as we all know. And so that van can be used for folks who need it around the town in general. It doesn't have to be specifically for seniors. We had these beautiful granite curbs in our community in some of our
Oh.
streets. And so then what ends up happening is
Mhm.
someone has to think about the curb cuts to make sure that folks who are parking and folks who are who have the mobility needs to have not just a step up on these beautiful granite curbs, but can actually access the sidewalks and the streets. So those conversations have come up in Exeter as well to make sure that everyone can access those beautiful, pristine granite curbs. Not everywhere in town, by the way. Not our whole town is not rolling in granite curbs, but
I was gonna say
in the
that.
new, could you
That's
imagine?
a big budget line item right
That's a
there.
big budget line item, but there are specific roads where those have been put in, and they are so
Mhm.
nice. And you have to think about the curb cuts, of course. Another thing that has come up, not so much, maybe it has come up in Budget Recommendations Committee, but something that I know that we talk about a lot, and I'm thinking about it because the town election is coming up, are the accessible voting devices at our town
Yeah.
elections. And so that is part of the there's a section in the budget around elections. And so making sure that we have those devices so that anyone is able to vote, that nobody is disenfranchised from being able to vote in the Exeter town elections. I think if we were not the first in the state to have them, we were one of the first in the states to have them at all of our town elections. And so now it's statewide, but that was
Mm.
something that Exeter made sure to put in place a few years ago, and it has been so important when it comes to folks being able to vote and access their and being able to use the power of their vote.
So I don't know how much you interact with your sort of budgeting peers in other towns, but how do you think other towns can follow Exeter's? It sounds like Exeter has done a really good job of ensuring accessibility and inclusion for residents with disabilities. What would be your suggestion to other towns to ensure that they are they are being as inclusive as they can be to their disabled residents?
One of the things that Exeter does Exeter asks, send out surveys and says, what is it that our
Wow.
community, I know, imagine. And I'm a former high school English teacher from many, many years
uh,
ago now. But there's a general rule. The first rule of teaching, as I like to say, is don't ask a question you don't want to hear the answer to. You never want to ask a question that's like, did you like the book? Because I guarantee you're not going to want to hear the answer back from your high schoolers. But Exeter asks those questions not for fun, not to check a box, but to actually make change in the town. And I don't know where that started. I would like to say that that probably started by a really incredible parent advocate that we have who lives in town, who has been advocating for her and her daughter and her family to make sure that the town is accessible for them. Because when the town is accessible to them, it's accessible to so many other folks. And so
yeah.
I know that she has been working on this for years to make sure that Exeter is doing all of the work doing a lot of the work. There's always work to be done, but it has led to significant changes in our town. There is now the adult changing table in our town offices, which
Yep.
means that that is now available to anybody, whether you're in Exeter or traveling here. There are planned adult changing tables in the library and the rec building. Those are planned to be added in, and what that what that means and my whether it's advice or recommendations to the other towns is like what that message sends not just to your own community but to folks who are from anywhere. They see that this is available in Exeter, and so they come to Exeter even if it's for the day to just hang out. They know that their family will have that available to them, and so they can come hang out in our downtown because that is now accessible for them. And so you ask your community, what do you need? And then you make those changes to the best of your ability because it's the right thing to do. And also, it brings people to your community, which is, as we like to say in New Hampshire, one of the economic drivers. Very important for your town,
Yeah.
for your town to be successful. So it's like it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the families and the community members who need it. And it's a win for the town and the taxpayers to be able to have folks coming to their community and being in their small businesses and spending the day in the downtown area. That helps everybody. So I would encourage other towns to, I mean, I'm not going to tell, I can't speak for our department heads. I can't speak for our town, but I think if you're in a surrounding community or if you're in New Hampshire and you're like, how does Exeter do it? You should just reach out to whether it's our acting town manager or our select board, because we want everyone to be like this. We want everyone to be able to learn what our community has learned. We would be, I'm sure, I feel certain that our Exeter folks would be happy to share what we've learned, how we've done it, and how maybe we could even do it better in the future.
So anyone listening, yes, we Liz said reach out to Exeter. I'm not gonna.
Look, I am married to one of the select board members,
Oh
so
well,
my
there we
wife
go.
serves on the select board. So you can just call her. You can just give her a call, and she'll be
Okay.
happy to chat about it.
Okay, everyone remember, Liz said, please call my wife.
Please call my wife and ask her all about the things that Exeter has done. But I really think like this could be maybe my bias, but I love learning new things.
Mhm.
That's the whole premise of my podcast, right? I love learning new things. And so if we're doing something well, I want other people to know it too. And if there are things we can learn, I want us to learn those things so that we can be better. So it's, very reciprocal. Like there might be things that are happening in Manchester or Berlin or other places that we can learn from. And so that communication, which may already be happening, that communication is so vital so that we can just have better, more accessible communities for everybody. Everybody benefits when you think about inclusivity. Everyone benefits in a community.
Everyone really does, and people with disability, we talk to each other,
Yeah,
and
right. Yes.
yeah, it when my husband uses a wheelchair and I go someplace and find it incredibly accessible, we tell all of our friends who may
Exactly.
need that accessibility, and and we go a lot of places and spend money in all these communities, and so yeah. Um, mm, my final question is, so if someone else was interested in starting a podcast of their own,
Mm.
is 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 this something that you feel is accessible mo- to people, or was it really hard and labor intensive? Do you have any suggestion about someone starting a podcast?
I mean, I feel like everyone already has a podcast, but if you
Okay.
don't and you want to start one, yes, absolutely. So it when I was thinking about starting the podcast,
Mm,
the thing that mattered the most to me was making sure that I had high quality guests, people who really knew their issues and knew that they could chit chat with me casually or otherwise, and wanting to make sure that I was making it, I was talking about things in a way that anybody could really grab onto and understand and be part of. And so maybe a podcast you want to start is like around storytelling or crime or disability rights or whatever it is. And it's like this is one medium to be able to share information. It's a medium that a lot of people participate in. They listen to podcasts on their drive, they listen to podcasts while they're washing their dishes or gardening. And so yeah, it is extremely accessible to start. If you've ever been on a Zoom, if you've ever been on a Google Meet, you could start a podcast. That is pretty
Oh,
much all you need to get started. And so I am always happy to chat with folks who are interested in starting one because I'm still learning. Like I said, I love learning. And it is it is a really fun and scary thing. It's scary to put yourself out there like that
yeah.
to hit publish and know that people are going to listen to my voice. But it's really for me it sort of feeds a creative piece that I enjoy and sort of my interest in learning, interest in sharing information, my educator side of my brain as well. So if you're
Mm.
interested in starting a podcast, go for it. Like just give it a try. There's a lot of resources out there, and I'm always happy to chat with folks too if they're interested.
Well, that's great. I really enjoyed this time. Thank you so much for spending it with me. Eh, so where can people listen to your podcast, and how can they connect with you if they're interested?
New Hampshire Has Issues is a podcast that is anywhere you listen to podcasts. So if you
Okay.
listen on Apple, if you listen on Spotify, if you listen on YouTube, I did not know before I started this process that people listen to podcasts on YouTube. I was like, what? So it is everywhere you might listen to a podcast. And also on social media, the handle is NH Has Issues. So whether you're on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, I'm all over the place in terms of social media. And you can always send me an email. Maybe you have an idea for an episode. Send me an email, newhampshirehaisissues@gmail.com. I would love to hear from folks. I have had guests on from that sort of outreach of wanting to be on the podcast. Pat, for example,
That's
just
how we
saying.
got in touch.
That's how
Yeah.
we connected. Yeah, I love when folks reach out and say, "Hey, I have this idea." And that's where really great episodes come from.
And yeah, so I'll just say I just reached out to Liz and said, "Hey, I have an idea for you," and
Hmm.
Liz got right back to me. So this has been great. We will have all the information in the description, and so if anyone wants to reach out or listen, please, please do so. Listen to New Hampshire. This year you will learn so much more about New Hampshire than even
And
even
you
if
wanted to,
you
maybe.
maybe you want to, but even if you think you know a lot about New Hampshire, you will learn just so much more. So thanks, Liz, for joining me.
Thank you,
And
Pat. Thanks for having me on.
yeah, yeah, it was great to have you on. Hopefully, we'll be running into each other again
I am sure.
Granite. What's the name of that
One
building again?
Granite Place.
One Granite Place. One Granite Place. Maybe under better circumstances
Ah,
in
what
the
a dream that would
future.
be.
That would be awesome if we were actually there to talk about something that's moving the state ahead rather than things that are trying to move the state backwards.
That's right. It's not always fun to have to defend against attacks, but it's necessary. And
Right.
so it was great seeing you there. We will see each other again there, I'm sure. And I really appreciate you inviting me on your podcast. This is wonderful. I had a great time.
This, this has been great.
Thank you.
You make it so easy.
Happy to chit chat anytime.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Liz, and we'll be seeing you to the one. I'll be. I'll. We'll definitely let you know when it comes out.
Perfect.
And if we need more information from you for the description or the the transcript.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. This was wonderful.
Okay.
I'll see you soon.
Bye. See you.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.